Hello and welcome. I'm Ann Johnson and I'd like to welcome you to an Ethics Concept Review module. It's brought to you by the Geotech Center, a national science-funded project to support community college geospatial programs. This review module is going to focus on ethics related to geospatial technology, but also on teaching ethics concepts in a geospatial program. Ethics is really a multidimensional conundrum, and we run into ethics questions in our everyday life, but really, is it doing good and not doing bad? If you ignore something that's bad, is that unethical? If you just ignore it and don't act on it, does it have to be illegal to qualify as being unethical? And are all illegal acts unethical? Would all cultures agree on what constitutes ethical or unethical behaviors? Are ethics the same too for an individual, an organization, a government agency, or a society as a whole? This review module, though, is going to concentrate on ethics used in geospatial technology, and it's looking at student projects as well as those produced by students and by others in geospatial technology workforce. Currently, how are ethics enforced in these different areas? Well, one way is via an oath. Another way is a license. There are certification programs that include ethics, and then there are personal standards that have been developed by the individual. Really changed in the 1980s and 1990s as we went from paper maps to digital maps. It became much easier for just about anyone to create a map. So all these questions came up about ethics, privacy, about the individual and the data in the map, the accuracy of the maps, who owns that intellectual property. Is there conflicts of interest, social justice, and all sorts of other issues came up. One of the really good books that should be in every geospatial program library is Monmunir's book on how to lie with maps. While it was written in 1991, it still provides a lot of ways to look at ethics and look at the intentional or unintentional misleading visualizations of data. The other thing that really changed is that geospatial technology went from an individual using software perhaps to a recognized profession. And so as it matures, it began to have more formal questions about moral and ethical standards. In 2007, the National Science Foundation funded the Graduate Ethics Education for Future Geospatial Technology Professionals project, and it really recommended inclusion of ethics in geospatial programs and provided some case studies, and we'll look at some of those in a bit. So what is an oath versus a license or a personal certification or personal standards? Well, oaths and licenses are generally required by a government agency to ensure public safety and protection. Medical doctors actually generally do both. They take an oath, one, to do no harm, but then they must pass numerous examinations to be licensed to practice medicine. Geospatial professionals might need to be licensed. There are some states now that require surveys to be licensed, but generally they are not licensed. Codes of ethics are part of certification programs, and we'll look at some of those. These are not government licenses to protect public safety. They're usually through an independent professional organization. And of course, as we have students come through a program, we hope that they are developing personal standards for their own individual ethical benefit. This is a Hippocratic oath for scientists as proposed by David King. And I'm not going to read all the things, but it has a lot to do with geospatial professionals, doing rigorous, being good scientific work, steps to prevent corrupted practices, misconduct, respect, minimize and justify adverse advect from your work, responsibility, and transparency. I like the last one is be honest and admit when you don't know the answers. Certification, though, has become more common, and there are in these certification programs, they usually have a requirement that the individual being certified signs a code of ethics. And there's generally ramifications if an individual is found to be in violation of that code once they've signed it. The GIS Certification Institute, the American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, better known as ASPRS, and the United States Geospatial Intelligence Foundation all have professional certification practices and codes and require that signing of an ethics statement. The links below, you can go and look at more details about each of those programs. Well, ethics for the geospatial technology workforce. Not everybody is going to qualify to become a certified professional, at least just coming out of an institution and graduating. Geospatial technology can provide situations where the individual is really in a difficult situation, and we're going to look at some of those case studies to really understand the correct ethical pathway. So what are the ethics for someone working in the geospatial workforce? And what should students be learning as they go through a program about ethical standards and ethics? The two questions too is, you see some programs and how should ethics be incorporated in a geospatial curriculum? A lot of times you'll see them as a standalone course, maybe in an ethics department, or maybe a unit within a course, but sort of separated from the actual thing. The other question is, should it be really theoretical ethics and philosophy, or should it be an ethics part integrated into a course with common language, excluding some of the jargon that needs a long explanation, and be part of a pathway or project program in a course. So in ethics and education, whether it's formal practice of certification or developing those personal standards, practitioners what should they practice for appropriate ethics, and what are they? This module is going to look at some ways that we can address ethics for projects or programs and suggest how to integrate some of those questions within a program. Ethics education for geospatial professionals includes some case studies that were developed through that National Science Foundation grant, and they're included on a website I've included below from Penn State. And these are case studies that set up a scenario and ask students to look at the ethical questions about what is happening within the case study. And I'm not going to go through each of these, but an analyst can be asked to exclude pertinent data. Is that ethical? Can you track people on mobile phones? Is that privacy issues? How about you have a disaster and you suddenly need lots of licenses, but you don't have very many? And are there conflicts of interest if you're doing a project? Also, if you're in defense, you may find that there are going to be civilian casualties if you do a certain type of preemptive missile attack. Is that an ethical question? And there are more studies provided by this case at Penn State. So the following is going to combine some use of critical thinking questions to highlight discussions related to ethical considerations. So a lot of programs have issues with integrating critical thinking questions into a program, and industry really wants students to come out able to think critically. So these questions address the two issues. One, ethics and specifically ethical questions, but it makes students think critically about those questions. And the case studies do that too. I want you to note too that these are questions are just examples. There could be many, many other questions that you could develop, and you can modify them for the needs for that particular course. So here are these questions, and they were based on numerous studies. I've included the links to those studies, and there are various steps that you can take as a student works through a project, and it will help hopefully create opportunities for critical thinking and ethics. So first one is identify and define the purpose and audience for a project or study. A lot of times a person thinks of a good study topic, but they really don't think about the people that the needs of the people that the study will benefit. Data is one where ethics comes in considerably. You can identify the needed data. Can you acquire it, develop it, and manage it ethically? Can you select the appropriate analysis methods to be used for that study? Also, how do you visualize that? How do you define the format, whether it's in maps, graphs, or charts, tables, other things? And what type of visualization or outcome are you going to present that project in for the audience and for the intended use? So the first one, identify and define purpose. And so here's some questions that you can ask. Is a topic transparent? I think, is it deceiving, confusing, or is it biased to begin with? Is a study topic addressing an issue important to your defined audience? How well do you know that audience? What do you know about that audience? And can you communicate with them effectively? How well do you know the topic of the study? Have you researched the topic, seen what other people have done? Are you referencing those things? Can you cite them? Is the level of the study appropriate for the intended audience? Is it going to be beneficial to them? 2 is data, and data is a place where many issues come up. So identify the needed data, acquire or develop the data, and manage the data. Can you collect the data for the study at a needed resolution and include adequate metadata? Does your created or acquired data protect individual privacy? And if it doesn't, will their data from individuals require an IRB? For the acquired data, do you have permission to use that data in your study? Can you verify its accuracy, its completeness, and its timeliness? Is it really up to date enough for you to use, or does it have earlier data that is needed? Does it include adequate metadata? How do you really verify its accuracy in other ways if it doesn't have good metadata? And have you cited its source? Can you justify the reason for selecting or not selecting any kind of data? And can you safeguard your data and provide availability to others to replicate your study? That's part of that data management practice. Selecting appropriate analysis methods to be used for the study is also important. Can you justify what analysis methods you used and how you use them? Is there coverage gaps in your data? Can you document how and why you filled those gaps and what analysis techniques you used to do that? Have you looked at its summary statistics and other statistics about your data? Have you reviewed those charts and graphs based on your data? What will you do with outliers? Will you ignore them? Will you incorporate them? How will you explain their inclusion or exclusion? That is, have you used all of the data, or did you use a subset, and how did you justify using just a subset or an aggregation of your data? Determine the format for visualizations of your maps, graphs, and tables or charts. Color is really important, and you'll see that in the How to Lie with Maps. It can convey meaning beyond just a symbol. How did you choose your colors? Do they really help clarify the analysis results based on their meaning? What about cultural imperatives? What do they have to do with understanding the meaning of the colors or symbols used? And are the colors consistent? Do your maps, graphs, and tables use the same colors for the different data sets consistently? Are the boundaries for the data aggregates appropriate or misleading? And that's the modifiable areal unit problem. Are colors and symbols useful and truthful to the proposed purpose and audience? And again, back to how to lie with maps. Are your charts and graphs helpful in communicating with the audience? Do they confuse them or do they help provide information? Presenting outcomes in a format appropriate for the audience in the project. What format have you chosen for that outcome? Is it going to be just a static paper map? And maybe if you're doing a presentation for a small community group, that may be what you're going to use. But maybe it will be web-based or interactive so that they can go online and either view it or interact with the data. What visualization formats will really support your analysis best? Are you using and incorporating in your visualizations appropriate maps, charts, and graphs? Are interactive appropriate for the audience and the study? Some audiences may not have access to tools that will help them, but understanding what ones are appropriate are best. Will the audience have access to the data and metadata? Could others reproduce your results based on your documentation and metadata? And this is part of a scientific study, is having that reproducibility. There are more details than are in this module. Additional information will be available as a document with links to include additional resources and about ethics and critical thinking in education from the GeoTep Center. This paper is in the work process right now, the end of 2021, and it should be available by the beginning of 2022. Thank you for listening. If you have any suggestions or need additional resources or questions about this, please do contact me. Thank you very much.